In one of my videos, we discussed how the adaptive triggers on the PlayStation 5's DualSense controllers were breaking, and although that problem has continued to go unchecked, as of now, people are starting to report stick drift on their DualSense controllers, and now Sony is being hit with a class action lawsuit. Let's get into it. So first of all, what is stick drift? Stick drift is a defect resulting in the character on screen moving around even without user input or their manual input onto the analog stick of the controller. Now, usually when you think of stick drift, you think of the Nintendo Switch, which has plagued the Nintendo Switch for a very long time now. When it comes to the Nintendo Switch though, the main Nintendo Switch, if you experience stick drift, you can just take off the controllers and replace them. But just like the DualSense controller here, that is too much. The controllers cost way too much money. They're $70 each and $80 to replace your Joy-Cons. But also with the Nintendo Switch, if you have the Lite version, the Nintendo Switch Lite, that is more of a problem because on the Nintendo Switch Lite, you cannot remove the controllers like you can do on the regular Nintendo Switch, making it so that if you wanted to get your controllers fixed on your Nintendo Switch Lite, you have to send in the entirety of your console, and if that doesn't work, you have to replace the entirety of your Nintendo Switch Lite console. A US law firm called CSK&D has filed a class action lawsuit against Sony over alleged PlayStation 5 DualSense drift. The complaint goes on to accuse Sony of being aware of this alleged DualSense drift via online consumer complaints. And that is one thing that I definitely wanted to touch on because this is what I've said before. Just like Nintendo, the whole reason the class action lawsuit reared its head is because people were already reporting that they were having stick drift problems and Nintendo didn't want to do anything about it. And the only reason they did anything at all, the only reason they finally started taking in Nintendo Switch controllers in for repair is due to the fact that the class action lawsuit took place. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done anything. In fact, when the class action lawsuit reared its head, Nintendo still tried to do nothing and requested that the entirety of the case be thrown away. With all that being said, this law firm here, CSK&D, the law firm that is now filing the class action lawsuit against Sony for stick drift, is the same company that has the ongoing class action lawsuit with Nintendo because of their stick drift. Now, if Sony has been aware of this DualSense controller stick drift problem and have been ignoring it just like Nintendo did, that is very anti-consumer of you, Sony. The thing is, I wouldn't be surprised if Sony was aware of the problem. Sony already is aware of the fact that their adaptive triggers are breaking and they still have not done anything about it. And I can't help but feel if Sony was aware of this problem and chose to ignore it, and the reason why Nintendo wanted to get that case dismissed without doing anything about it is because it's all about money at the end of the day. At the end of the day, Sony, like Nintendo, are major corporations and they do not care about you, even though it's important to us, even though it makes sense to us that these controllers should be built with extra care because, again, arguably they're the most important parts of your console because you cannot use your console without these controllers. At the end of the day, if your controller breaks, why would Nintendo and why would Sony want to fix the problem when you can walk into a store and pay for another controller? And then if that breaks 6 months to a year down the road, you come in to the store and pay another $70 and another $70 and another $70 for a controller and so on. That is more money in Sony and Nintendo's pocket. So what incentive do they have to actually fix the controller? Now, if we scroll down further in this article, there's a 14-second clip of somebody experiencing stick drift. And here we can see the fact that, yeah, this is definitely stick drift. They are not touching the controller in any way. They're not touching the analog stick, and their character is moving around in circles, showing that it is, in fact, the right analog stick that is having the problem, the directional one. At the moment, your options for fixing a busted DualSense controller is slim. You could go through Sony's PlayStation support page, which has a dedicated portal for issues with the PlayStation 5 hardware, including the DualSense PlayStation 5 controller. Just keep in mind that your PlayStation's support team is swamped at the moment fielding requests about the PS5, which is still nigh impossible to find. And by that, they mean that if you are having problems with your DualSense controller and you decide to call Sony or contact Sony for any reason, you're going to have problems due to the fact that people are still calling to figure out where all the PlayStation 5s are at. And we all know the answer to that question. Most of the PlayStation 5s were sold to scalpers. This person later goes on to say that I listened to a dozen different pre-recorded messages informing me that PlayStation support is not the place to inquire about finding a PlayStation 5, which is just mind-blowing. You can't call Sony to figure out where you can get a PlayStation 5 at all. That was surprising to me for sure. This person then goes on to say that he was on hold for 17 minutes and then once he finally got through to a person over at Sony's support team. They then explain to them that yes, his DualSense controller is covered under warranty, but then it goes on to explain that you will, however, have to pay for shipping your controller to Sony's repair center. The lawsuit later goes on to explain why people may be experiencing stick drift in their DualSense controllers. The lawsuit claims that Sony equipped the PlayStation 5 DualSense controller with virtually the same analog component as the PlayStation 4's DualShock 4, which reportedly also suffered from drift. Now, someone in the comments made a very good point. That's one of my complaints. I'm still surprised that Sony hasn't even added a system-wide calibration system while both Nintendo on the Nintendo Switch and Steam has. It would have been a decent workaround and a blessing for dream creators. This is actually a very good point. One of the things that you can do on your Nintendo Switch to address the stick drift problem before sending it in for repair or replacing it entirely is messing around with the calibration of the analog stick. That is something you can find over in system settings of your Nintendo Switch, and something that Sony definitely should have implemented. So I shouldn't have to explain this, but I feel as though I do. For those of you that have a DualSense controller and haven't experienced stick drift, that is awesome, and I'm really happy to hear that you haven't had to deal with any of this nonsense. But there are other people who have. The same way I haven't experienced any stick drift on my Nintendo Switch since the day I got it, but clearly with these class action lawsuits, there is a substantial amount of people who have experienced stick drift with their Nintendo Switches. I'm just making that very clear because I always get those like 3 people in the comments that are like, well, I haven't experienced stick drift on my DualSense controller, therefore nobody in the world has. Like, come on. With that being said though, no, we do not have a clear sense of exactly how many people are suffering from stick drift on their DualSense controllers. Either way, it is enough to warrant a class action lawsuit, and Sony needs to address the problem. I love you all. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.